Now, think of this question. Think of all the bosses you've ever had. How many of them were awesome? Were great leaders? Heck, we're good leaders. Would you say 70%, 60%, half, less than half, 10%, 5%? Maybe you're one of those people who haven't even had a good boss yet, which is actually pretty common. It's usually on the low side. Hello, my name is Michael Denisoff, and I've dedicated my whole life to helping organizations reach high levels of success and build great and robust cultures. And this is the Work Trauma: How Corporations Really Work podcast. I'm excited about this one today because this is really near and dear to me. We're going to be looking at the dearth or the lack of good managers, good leadership within organizations, despite all the money we spent training these managers. All right, let's get started. All right, so for as long as I've been around and longer, so let's say 40 years plus, organizations have spent billions and billions of dollars on training programs. This training program, 3-day training program, half-day training program, off-site training program, online training program, and now we have the new training programs. A lot of money and a lot of work hours. So a lot of money training managers to be better managers, right? And what's really interesting is there's millions of books on this. Type in Google, type in leadership books. It's over a bazillion now. I'm not sure if that's a real term, but it's a lot. And there's more leadership books. Everybody has a solution about leadership coming out every day. And there's all the leadership gurus, right? My favorite for sure, Stephen R. Covey, my first job. So that was a big one for me. There's back in the day, there was Ken Blanchard, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Peter Senge somewhere in there. Now they're kind of the modern ones too. They're all these leadership gurus. Simon Sinek is a good one. I like him. He's really great. So they all have this stuff. We seem to like it and it resonates with us, and yet it's having very little impact on leadership and people getting better at managing people for sure. Listen, I've personally worked for and consulted to so many organizations that were not really reaching their full success because they were limited by the number of great or even good managers throughout the organizations, right? So, like I said, so all these training programs, these team building programs, the communication classes, the emotion intelligence classes, the TED Talks, the gurus, and yet there still is an alarming lack of competent leaders and managers within organizations. And yet nobody asks the question why. Aren't we curious why we're spending all this money these last 40, 50 years on all this training, and yet it really isn't much better? And it's still a huge issue. Why is this training really not working like it should? I mean, it should. It makes sense. Why isn't it not working? Seriously, if you know, let me know. I'm going to give you my take. I personally think it's a variety of things, what it is, and a combination of them. But if you have an idea, let me know because I can't believe all this. And by the way, I've taught thousands, nay, millions, no, thousands, hundreds, nay, thousands of training classes, particularly early on in my life. So it's really amazing to me how bad it is in organizations still to this day with all this investing in resources in these training programs. So let's talk about from my point of view, the many reasons why this is still an issue. Number one, being a good manager is tough. It's just tough to manage people. People are wonderful and fantastic and creative, and they're also petty and mean sometimes, right? So being a good leader, this is a real tangible, uh, credible and capability and skill set. It's not easy to be a good manager, and you really have to dedicate your life to it if you want to be good to it. So, as we always say in these training programs, leadership is not a title, it's who you are. But a lot of people really aren't fit yet, or maybe they're never going to be fit yet to be a leader in an organization. So it's just naturally tough. So keep that in mind. And related to this is we know one of the toughest transitions, right, or turns in all of business is moving from an individual contributor where you're relying on yourself, right, to get things done, to get that good performance review at the end of the year, to relying on your team, others, your direct reports to get done, right? You go from kind of leading yourself to leading others. This is one of the most critical and toughest uh, turns or transitions in all of business, like I said, And yet we know this for the fact, a lot of new supervisors, they don't even go through new supervisor training. Or if they do, it's 2 years after they become a supervisor, which means they've learned a lot of bad habits, particularly from their supervisors from the past. So they've dug themselves a hole. And some of the new supervisor training is, not worth the darn, to be honest with you. So we know it's important. We know there's a dearth in it, and yet companies still aren't doing a great job. Most companies are not doing a great job with new supervisor training. All right. What's another problem with it? Well, our society today, we have some people, they like the title of manager, they like the pay of manager, they don't want to do the hard stuff of being a manager. So firing people, giving tough feedback, right? Doing the budget, um, holding people accountable usually is one of the main ones. As a consultant, a lot of these things boil down to either communication issue or accountability issue, or both. Usually it's combo of both, right? So some people like being a manager, but are not willing to do what it takes to become a good manager. So keep that in mind. All right, what else? All right. So as we get to this training part where we invest so much money in training, or companies invest so much money in training, what happens is this really good knowledge is left in the classroom. So I go to this training, I get all I get all pumped up, I got some new skills, I'm going to try out, I'm going to be I'm committed to be a better manager. I come back, and my boss is not really into me about developing these skills, or reinforcing these skills, or coaching me to these skills. Often my manager doesn't model what I just learned in the classroom, right? Because we learn, right? Oh no, I turned into my mother. Oh my God, I turned into my father. We turned into our old bosses, even if we hate them, because that's what we know. So a lot of these managers, don't model what people might be learning in the training room for a variety of reasons. One, they don't care. Two, they think they're already there, they're already great, so without that reinforcement and that modeling to reinforce these skills, a lot of times these skills don't stick, if you will. But what else? Let me say. Oh, uh, often, somebody just wants to sometimes managers want weaker managers under them so they can push them around. So they don't really want to develop strong managers. So not only is it not being done because there's a lack of will, a lack of effort, but it's done because, hey, man, I like people I can push around as the big boss man. So I kind of like my managers not that strong. So, I can't tell you how many times too I would be teaching a leadership program, and we would say, "Oh, this is what good leadership is. This is what it should look like in your organization." And have 3/4 of class go, "Ugh," roll their eyes and make funny faces. And I would say, "Why are you guys making that funny faces?" "Oh yeah, our leadership team, our executive team, my boss, our bosses are nothing like what you're talking about." So that happens quite a bit as well. All right, still going with this. So this is an interesting one to me that I feel really strong about. Okay, why? So there's a lack of good leaders, good managers in an organization, is because, and it's connected to what we just talked about. There's a lack of leadership, uh, of a leadership culture, or leadership excellence culture, as I like to call it. Right? It comes from when we have leaders or managers. I know there's a difference between leaders and managers. I know that, but I'm using them interchangeably now. But we have managers, and we don't hold them accountable to be good managers. And you see this all the time, right? We should be hiring and firing and promoting based on our standards and our organization for what we say a good leader or a good manager is. But we don't. We just kind of roll with it. We just kind of get so busy, or maybe just lazy. We don't have that tough conversation. So there's an overall lack of development and focus on leaders. You should have pride. Like, we have the best managers in the world. If you ever had a company that had some of the best managers in the world, if you had 98% of your managers who were really good at their job leading people, your company would be doing awesome. There's just no doubt about that. Okay. Now, listen, we always hear this term, which is generally true, which is people quit managers, they don't quit companies. And I understand that. I get that, by the way. And I think at the first level, that's true, right? People quit their manager. They have a bad manager, but love the company. If they can't get out from under that manager, they leave the company. And the converse is true. There's been many times a good manager, a great manager leaves a company, and a bunch of people follow them, even for less pay, because being a good manager is at a premium. Okay. But when we say people quit managers, they don't quit companies, I think that's insufficient, really, because who's really developing the managers? Who's making sure that there are no bad managers going on? Who's making sure that nobody has to go through the terror of having a terrible boss? The company itself. So although in the immediate moment, the person quits the manager, not the company, ultimately the company develops or tolerates the level of leadership and management they want in the company. So ultimately, they actually do quit the company, which, by the way, they actually do quit the company anyway. All right. So does that make sense? So if you have a company, you need to have a strong leadership ethic in that company. And you should expect all your managers, whether they're supervisors or executives, to live by those standards, which by the way, a lot of companies talk about, but don't follow through on for sure. All right. Let me take a breath. All right. All right. Number 6. So why do these training programs not working, not lifting the overall capacity and capabilities of managers? Well, quite frankly, some training programs are bad. They're fraudulent. They're weak. They sound good. They make sense on the surface, but they're not really good. So a lot of these programs are light on substantive content. Some of it's bad. Some of it's bad content that's being recycled through the years, and they put whipped cream on it, and they think it's great now, or they use different terms, but it's still the same stuff, and it's weak, right? And years ago they used to call it like training by the pound. It meant, well, the bigger the 3-ring binder, the bigger their workbook, the better the training. That's how people judge training, which of course is patently foolish and crazy to think that. But bad training companies think more is better when better is better. Okay, quality is better. All right, that's good. But there are some programs out there, so make sure you vet them. 2, a lot of these programs and or trainers of these programs haven't figured out how to translate the topics into actions in real life, right? So, bullet points on a slide mean very little if you can't do that, make that happen, manifest that in real time in your actual job, right? And so we should have more, I don't know, real life um, role plays and exercises, but a lot of times we limit them if people don't know how to do them just right, or they're not really coached too well, right? So, but you gotta when you're in the safe walls of a training class, everything on that slideshow or the video you see makes sense. But the key is, how do you bring it home? That's the key. And a lot of these programs, do not know how to do that for sure. Um, and like I say, with the weakness of programs. Now, I'm going to get a lot of gasping from people who are in the training world on this one. For example, I would never teach an emotional intelligence course. Well, I can just say that emotional intelligence is all important. Tell you why, because it's stupid. Now, might I do talk a quick intro on what EI is and EQ is? Sure, I might do that for sure. But I wouldn't teach an EI course. I would teach a course on something a manager does using EI. See, EI by itself is just this thing, and it's a nice thing, but I'm not, and I might aspire to it, but I don't know what it really means in everyday a practicum, right? So I'll do a course on, I don't know, delivering feedback through really good EI methods, or communicating one-on-one through good EI, running a meeting through good EI. I do that. That's what I do. I would never just offer this EI meeting with, there's EI, and here's how the brain works, and amygdala. And that all sounds great, but how do I apply that? The application is what matters the most. And a lot of these programs just really don't cut the mustard into telling you how to bring it home. All right. Next up, there are a lot of really bad trainers out there. You know what I'm saying? There's good ones. There's a lot of bad ones too. Now, reasons why they're bad is, well, they couldn't be anything else, so they decided to be a trainer. I'm just half joking. I was a trainer. But when I was a trainer, man, I made sure I floated from being training to actually doing line jobs. So I kind of went back and forth on that. But a lot of these trainers, they've actually never, run a team, fired somebody, gave really tough feedback, held people accountable, learned how to budget, and they're training people. So I think there's a huge disconnect there. Now, if you don't totally have that, can you have moments of that? Can you build that acumen as a trainer? Yes, but I would say most trainers should kind of go in and out of a line role and a training role. I think that would be best, for sure. And and how do you know you have a bad trainer? Bad trainers are easy because they're all, hey man, and they got videos. We're gonna see this cool video from this cool movie. You'll really like it. And they go, oh, how'd you like that? Like, "Oh, it's a clip from a movie I like." Okay, whatever. They're gimmicky, they throw candy at you, or the worst ones are really ones that will put up a quote when they say, "Huh? Huh? Quote? Huh? Good quote. You like that quote? Really crystallizes everything." And that's pathetic, to be honest with you. There's a lot of that. Pissing off a lot of people, I'm sure. A lot of these folks too, they make it about themselves. They're training like they're the lawgiver, spreading their wisdom to the lowly, managers in training when one, they haven't been managers themselves. And they kind of make it about themselves, right? So, they want to be the guru, they want to be the mini guru, and they make it about themselves, and they keep on waiting at the end of the class for somebody, the whole class to stand on their desk for them, like at the end of Dead Poet Society. They work for that high as opposed to really work to make sure people have the knowledge and the application to bring home to the office. I have tons of stories on really bad traders. One recently, I took over this company, had this trainer, and this guy was, people love me. I'm really wise. And you could tell he tried to be Zen, and his training on the surface looked fine, but it wasn't really good. It really worked on making people feel better about themselves, which in itself isn't a bad thing. It's just not training and equipping them to do something better, be more effective. So I always called him infotainment. His name, right? He's good at infotainment, gives them information, be entertaining. People like it. You get 5 out of 5 on the smile sheet. Yay, but nothing really changed. And that happens a lot. Two, I went inside to consult and really do some org design or redesign for this particular hospital that had some really bad training teams, OD teams, and the people said, "But my class keeps on getting great remarks." Well, it got great marks for one or really two reasons. One is it was infotaining, if you will, but mostly because they did so little training at this hospital. People just were dying for something. Or I used to tell the group is that, when you're that hungry, cardboard tastes well, tastes good. So you got to be careful of these trainers who just can't hang it. So yeah, trainers really kind of impact also the effectiveness of this training. And there's a lot of flow trading out there, right? We think if we read a book on something, we understand it, and you don't. You have to apply it. It's like reading a book on tennis, reading 10 books on tennis and think you could play tennis. You really gotta apply it for sure. Or if you watch a TED talk and you're really inspired, you didn't really train. You watch something and maybe inspired you, right? Or you shared a TED talk. Oh, I'm a developer of people now. I'm sharing TED talks. These are very kind of minuscule ways. Now, if you want to do something with that TED talk, maybe you write up 5 questions for it and have your team answer those questions about that TED talk. And then now you're getting into the realm of it, or how do we apply this at work in a very tangible way. So there's a lot more you can do, but there's a lot of faux training out there. Um, yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so that's the training stuff. Now getting back to again why there aren't great managers, or there's a lack of great managers or even good managers in an organization. It's who's getting promoted. We've talked about this in a previous podcast, the wrong reasons why people get promoted. Again, oftentimes people get promoted in the managerial ranks because they're political, they're a brown noser, you know. Yeah, and there's some managers that produce results and do great work. Whatever it is, people figure it out. And if they want to be a manager, they'll start mimicking that behavior. So basically, what you're hiring, promoting for, and firing for, people figure out really quick and they start doing that. So what you put out there, you're going to get as an organization. All right. And then, you know, um, I can't even read this one because I got so excited about it. So I'm going to skip it. I love it. All right. So that makes sense. So that's a lot of the reason. And by the way, it's a combination of all. My gut would tell me it's a combination of all these things. But it's a lot of money being spent for training right now through these last 40, 50 years. And it really hasn't moved the dial as you think it would for sure. All right. So let's talk about solutions really quick. So how do we make sure for ourselves as an organization training is maximized? Well, one, vet the training, make sure the training is good and real, right? Make sure it aligns with what the company wants, what the standards are. And of course, make sure you're able to hire and fire and promote based on what people are learning in these trainings, right? Literally get rid of bad managers quickly. The sooner the better. And then train somebody to take your place who's good. That's the best thing you could do. All right. You should make sure your higher up managers, your directors, your executives, are reinforcing and modeling the standards of what it means to be a good manager, a good leader in the organization, for sure. And like we keep saying is you want to connect that training to real life, right? So put in assessments, coach to it, hold people accountable. Hey, you went through this training course. What were your two things you got out of it? What are the two things you're going to focus on? As your coach, I'm going to coach you to that. I might even put that in your individual development plan. We're going to make it real and something that's tangible. And we're going to coach to it. We're going to get you there. And I'd say, oh, you took a class. You're an expert at this for sure. Oh, I just said that. Build into develop people's development plans. Build it into the performance management tool, right? So this is what great leadership looks like, and we're going to grade you on that. And if you're not above bar, we're going to probably pull you from being a manager. We might not fire you, but you'll go back and as an individual contributor. Okay, and this goes also to an important management skill, which is be a feedback-rich organization, constantly giving feedback, what the person is doing well, what the person can do better, particularly around managing and leading inside the organization, for sure. But you have to, as an organization, one of your core values should be developing managers, developing talent in general, but develop talent, not just talent, but develop talent, because a lot of your talent's going to be managers or going to be leaders. So be sure you're very intentional about that. All righty. And of course, do this great early on. We talked about people not getting their new supervisor training till 2 years into it, or maybe not getting any at all. So make sure your new supervisor right from the get-go. They got great training, they got a mentor, they got somebody that can help them. Their managers all on them to make sure they're building strong leadership skills right from the get-go. So they could shadow other people, they could be mentored, it's so important. It's so important. Matter of during the pandemic, we learned a lot about how people really learn. And so a great example of that is one of my clients. They're a large architectural firm, and they were working remotely, right? And training architects are wonderful, unique people, and they realized their junior architects, their learning curve, which was pretty steep, was flat or kind of going down. And the reason why was because much of the learning as a young architect, it's just hanging out with the senior architects, and not just at the meetings. No, it's the time waiting in the airports for the plane. It's the time in the taxi cab, right? It's the time, having that very expensive meal at the airport that's overpriced, where you're just talking about what happened, what's going to happen next. That's where the real learning is, right? So think about that, how it applies to then, again, developing managers in an organization or developing yourself. All right. So number one, I would tell you though that just keeps coming to me clearer and clearer every day is to make sure to ensure that all your managers can do the basic blocking and tackling. Sorry for the football reference, but you want all your managers to do the really good basic stuff of leadership and be great at it. Because if they're not great at it, so I'm talking about things like giving feedback, modeling, right? Self-awareness, explaining what success looks like, coaching, communication, holding people accountable, right? Setting the way, and deliver, right? So these are basic things that if you don't do that, it doesn't matter about anything else, because this is where it all happens anyway. Fundamentally, everything kind of digresses, if you will, or distills down to the basic blocking and tackling, just like a football team. If you can't block someone, please don't try a flea flicker. All right. So really make sure at your organization for yourself, you have the foundation. I don't even call them basics, the foundations of being a great manager, a great leader, down packed. So perfect. Now they'll change a little bit, the more the different expectations, the higher you go up in the organization. But if you don't have them as a new supervisor or as a junior manager, it's going to be really hard for you to progress and get good at being a leader as you go higher up in the organization. So make sure that the basics are in place. Here's your bonus. Here's your bonus one. Other thing you do is make sure anything that's taught in these trainings goes from bullet point to real life. Okay, like I said, reading 10 books on tennis doesn't make you a tennis player. All right, now it's a good place to start. Watch some videos about how to play tennis, read some books on how to play tennis, but in the end, you got to pick up a racket and hopefully have somebody coaching you there, giving you feedback, right? Same thing in trainings, make sure the role plays are robust. I think it's one of the best things you could do to simulate. That's why I started a program, not to plug it, but I started a program called Leadership Live, which is really live coaching on real issues. And it's tough. It's a tough program. And it was inspired by when I was getting my coaching certification. We used to call the fishbowl. And what would happen? 30 people in a half circle looking at you in the middle of the room. It would be you and somebody who's going to coach. You're going to coach, and you're going to coach them in real time. And that's how you become a good coach, because there's no hiding. There's no faking it. You were there. Because after you coach that person for 15 minutes or so, every one of those people, 30 people in that half circle, would give you feedback, what you did good, what you messed up on, and what you need to do get better. And that was awesome. Now intense, but awesome. That's how you become a good coach. That's why I particularly picked the program I picked, because I want to be a good coach. I didn't want to just watch some videos on how to coach on my computer. I want to be a good coach. And the only way you do it, man, is by doing it and having that critical feedback given to you. Anyway, so that's it. But in the end, think about this. Do this podcast not to bash things, although it comes off that way sometimes. And I make fun of things, because quite frankly, some things do need to be made fun of. I mostly do this to help individuals, one, navigate how organizations really work and make a decision so they could have the best career and the kind of career they want. So with that said, this is Michael Denisoff for Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work. We'll see you on the next program. Thank you.